Okay, reversing operations. So I'm going to go through these questions and just show you how I would answer them. Okay, so the first one is, I think of a number, so let's call that x. I multiply it by 6, so I'm going to write it 6x, so that means multiplied by 6. And then I'm going to add 5, and it says that I get 59. Okay, so that's how I set the question up, and then it says, what is my number? Now I know some of you are going to just guess numbers, and that's absolutely fine. You can try and guess and say, what is it, 10, 60, 65? Well, that's a bit too low. What about 9? 6 9s are 54 plus 5. Yep, so that would work. But is there another way of doing it? Is there an easier way of doing it? Okay, so this is how we're going to show you inverse operations. For this, you need to know it. You need to get to remember what BIDMAS is, or BODMAS. So you do need to know BODMAS, so brackets, powers, division, multiplication, addition, and subtraction. So you'll need to know this in order to work out what this is happening here. And so the way I do this is I put two parallel lines like that, okay? And then I'm going to look at what operations are affecting. And we already know it said I times and then I added. So I'm going to go backwards to what they said. So I'm going to, first of all, I'm going to take away 5 from both sides. Okay, so that makes that 6x equals 54. And then I'm going to divide both sides by 6, because that's what the question says. So divide that by 6, I simply get x. 54 divided by 6, 9. Boom. Okay, so question 2, it says, I think of a number, I add 5, then divide by 6, and then subtract. Whoa, okay, so there's a lot going on here. So let's write it all out. I think of a number, I'm going to call this n this time, because you can use any letter you like. I'm adding 5, so I'm going to say add 5, and then divide by 6. Okay, so I divide by 6, and then subtract 3. So all of this, subtract 3, and I get 1 after all of that effort. Okay, so there's a variety of ways to do this. I'm going to show you a slightly different way to this, simply because there's so many things going on here, and maybe there's a language thing I can use here, which I think is kind of neat. So this way, I call this the arrow method. Okay, this is my arrow method, and you can apply it here as well. That would work there. But this is my arrow method. So I'm going to go, because it's an inverse, reversing, I'm going to go the other way. Okay, so let's just set it all up. So n plus 5 divided by 6, take away 3, equals 1. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go the other direction. So I'm going to do the opposite operation. So I'm going to add 3 times 6, take away 5. So kind of going backwards. So I start with my 1, and I add 3 to make 4. I times by 6 to make 24. And then I take away 5 to make 19. Okay, so I think the answer is 19, but I'm going to check. 19 plus 5 is 24. 24 divided by 6 is 4. Take away 3 is 1. Boom. Okay, so I'm going to write out here n equals 19, and that's a nice way of doing that question. Okay, question 3. Okay, Suzy has collected stamps over a month. Okay, so I mean, in this video, I'm only going to do the first 4 or 5, and then I'll do the next video for the other ones, so that we don't overkill ourselves, because we're already on 4 minutes. So Suzy has been collecting stamps for over a month. Her mother gives her 11 more, and then she sells half of them to get the money. Okay, so she's going to collect stamps. I'm not going to use S because it looks like a 5. So I'm going to use P. Okay. And mother gives her 11 more, so plus 11. And she then sells half of those, so divide by 2 to get some money. And now she's left with 21. So I'm left with 21. So again, there's different ways of doing this one. So I'm going to show, I'm going to do it in 2 ways, both ways. I'm going to show using this method here, and I'm going to show the arrow method. So I'm going to set the question up here. Now it looks a bit funny, so I'm going to write it out like this. It's all divided by 2, because everything she has is divided by 2, and that equals 21. So what you've got to understand here is I've got to get rid of that 2 first, because everything is divided by 2. So I've got to get rid of that 2. So the opposite of dividing is timesing. So I times both sides by 2, which means that this side simply becomes that, and double that, 42. Now I'm going to take away the 11 from both sides. So that means that P equals 31, and I would check 31 plus 11 is 42, divided by 2 is 21. Great. What about the arrow method with this one? Well, I've already got a setup here, so that helps me already. So let's write it out again. And so I'm now going to go backwards. So I'm going to say it's times by 2, take away 11. So 21 times by 2 is 42. Take away 11 is 31. And we've already seen that's there. And that's kind of really neat, isn't it? So let's go for question 4. Okay. Now this says, Mr. Finley has lots of cream eggs in a bag. Miss Chedburn takes 75%. The Easter Bunny gives me 3 more. So we've got lots and lots and lots and lots of questions. Let's put it all out there. Easter eggs, let's call it E then. It says, Miss Finley has lots of Easter eggs. Miss Chedburn takes 75%. That's a really interesting way of doing it. So she's going to take 75% of that. Okay. So I'm left with now just a quarter. So I'm just left with a quarter of that. And the Easter Bunny gives me 3 more. Thank you, Easter Bunny. He now has 1 dozen. A dozen means 12. So that was tricky because right at the beginning, Miss Chedburn takes 75%. And you need to remember that 75% is 3/4. So she takes 3/4. So she takes 3/4. I'm left with 1/4. 1/4 left over. So I'm left with a quarter of what I started with. A quarter of what? A quarter of divide 4. So now we've got that. Hopefully you should be able to see that's kind of loosely attached. So let's do this. I think most people are probably going to like the arrow method. Whenever I taught this in schools, the arrow method is what most people like. So let's start off. We have E divided by 4, add 3 equals 12. So now let's look at the opposite operations. Take away 3 times by 4. And let's try. So 12 take away 3 is 9. 9 times by 4, 36. Let's just check. 36 divided by 4 is 9, plus 3 is 12. Boom. So there you go there. Let's try question 5. Let's see if we've got time to squeeze in question 5. I think of a number, so let's call it x again. I treble it, meaning times it by 3. I then take away 10. I double it. Oh my life. Okay, so all of this doubled. So all of that doubled times by 2. And then add 9. This guy's got to get a life. I get 31. Right, okay, flipping heck. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to straight away look at this, and I'm just going to go backwards because I think that might work. So, but I can't get into the bracket yet, so I'll leave that as a bracket, and I'm just going to see what does the bracket equal. So the thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take away 9, and then I'm going to divide by 2. So I'm just going to concentrate at this point like this. So 31 take away 9 is 22. Oops, 22, sorry. 22 divided by 2 is 11. So I know that this bracket must equal 11. 11 times 2 is 22, plus 9 is 31. So now I can just concentrate on this bracket, and I think that's a nice way of doing it. So let's look at that. 3x minus 10 equals 11. So remember what I have here is 3x means x times by 3. Come on, focus. Minus 10 equals 11. So let's go backwards, add 10, divide by 3. So we get 11, add 10 is 21. 21 divided by 3, 7. So I think x is 7. But let's just check. 3 7s are 21, minus 10 is 11, good. Times by 2 is 22, good. Add 9 is 31. Boom. Okay, so they're the first 5 questions. We'll look back later and try the others.